Okay, so this is the bridge that they were found under. They sat under this bridge for over 40 years. People just drove over this bridge, going to work every day. No idea that the two girls were under the bridge. On May 19th, 1971, two girls traveling to a party in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, vanished, and the mystery of what happened to Cheryl Miller and Pamela Jackson would not be solved for another 40 years. My name is Bert Moran, and this is the case of the bodies under the bridge. So, on that night, May 19th, 1971, two best friends, Cheryl and Pam, were getting ready to attend a end-of-year party at a local quarry. Something that the two girls were not really known for is being like party girls. They didn't really do this kind of thing ever. They were mostly described as good girls, basically. They didn't smoke, they didn't drink, and they were both described as very well-behaved individuals. So this night was a little different, as they had been invited to the end-of-the-year party, which was happening at this local quarry. Cheryl told her parents that she was going to pick up Pam and they were going to go roller skating. It was reported that the two girls stopped at the hospital to visit Cheryl's grandmother, who at the time was battling cancer. And after that, they met up with a few friends at a local church. So this happened in the Beersford, Vermillion area of South Dakota, which at the time were not exactly extremely heavily populated. They're not really that densely populated now, so most people know everybody at this point. So one of their classmates, a boy named Mark Lauderman, who was at the church, invited them to follow him and his friends out to the quarry, as the girls had actually not been there before and they needed directions. Lauderman recalled seeing the girls following them up the hills and these back roads, and at one point they themselves had missed the turn to the quarry and they had to turn around. By the time they turned around, the girls were no longer following them, which made him think that maybe they didn't miss the turn and they just made it into the quarry. But he also remembered, while at the party, not seeing them and making them all believe that maybe the girls just changed their mind. As I said before, they're not exactly known for this kind of partying. Unfortunately, at this point, the two girls were never seen again. One of the questions that you might be asking yourself is, how did they not get seen going into the river that night? Or the creek, I should say. These are dirt roads. It was May, if I remember correctly, 1971. So it's not like the cars had the greatest headlights in the world. And in the middle of May, teenagers hauling ass out to a gravel pit to party probably throws up quite a bit of dust. In fact, I can guarantee it does. So that amount of dust in the air at night, looking in your rear view, it's very plausible that they did not see the lights go into the river. That means that they must have came off this side. At around 4 a.m. the next morning, whenever Pamela's mother realized that the porch light was left on, something that she would do for her daughter to come home, be able to see at night, Pamela usually turned the light off. But whenever she noticed that the light was left on, that she realized that maybe her daughter hadn't come home. So she went to check in her room and found that she was not there. And it was around this time that Cheryl's family was also noticing that she was not there either. By that afternoon, both families attempted to file missing persons report. However, authorities informed the families that they had to wait the mandatory 24 hours to do so. And if you follow my channel at all, you'll know that that actually changed with Brandon's Law, which was put in place after Brandon Swanson went missing. By May 21st, 1971, police launched a missing person investigation into the disappearance of both Cheryl Miller and Pamela Jackson. Right away, investigators looked at the boys that they were following out to the quarry as their suspects, but they had nothing really to go on with that. They didn't believe that they had anything to do with their disappearance, so they moved on from that quickly. However, going on from that didn't really give them much of a lead on what could have happened to the girls. As you would expect, it did not take long for the case to go cold, as they had no real evidence to go on. However, they did have a lot of theories popping up. One was about the girls possibly driving into the Missouri River, but with no tire tracks leading into the river at any point, they kind of moved on from that. Rumors began to spread about what could have happened to the two girls. Cheryl Miller told her sister at one point that she wanted to be a model, so some people believe that she convinced Pamela to run away with her to California. Now, it seems like this is a rumor that gets brought up, or not even really a rumor, just a theory that happened with almost every single missing person case, that the police try and say, well, they kind of ran away. You hear that a lot, and obviously in this case, that's not what happened. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does, but it just seems like it's almost like an easy get out of work situation. And like I said, it didn't take long for this case to go cold, and they had no leads leading up to the year 2004, whenever South Dakota decided to open a new missing person division, and one of the cases that they were looking into was that of Cheryl and Pamela. Now enters a man named David Lycan. Lycan was already in police custody in 2004, serving a 225-year sentence for rape and kidnapping, and this guy had a long history of just violence, I guess hence the 225-year sentence. And the police actually got a heads up to look into Lycan for the girl's disappearance from his own sister. She claimed to have seen the two girls' bodies in the car they were driving that night, which was a Studebaker Lark, on the Lycan family farm. So whenever they started looking into it, they found that Lycan knew both the girls, and he actually rode the school bus with Cheryl and attended church with both of the girls. Plus, the Lycan family farm was relatively close to the area where the girls disappeared. I do not want to undersell just how big of a piece of shit David Lycan was. One of his first victims was his own wife, who he was married to for 4 months. He would SA her and strangle her, and threaten to kill her if she did not do everything he said. His second victim was a waitress in a cafe who in 1982, they started dating, and whenever she tried to break it off, he SA'd and strangled her as well. Lycan actually kidnapped his third victim, driving around Clay County and SAing her. He later then broke into her son's apartment where he SA'd her again. Lycan would eventually plead guilty for burglary in that case, and was ordered to a court-ordered program for rehabilitation. His fourth victim was a woman he met at a Christian single conference who he attempted to start a relationship with, and after she denied him, the courts ordered him to move to Colorado due to the fact that he was behaving so strangely. But eventually he did return to South Dakota. And when Lycan returned to South Dakota, he went to her residence and told her that God told him that she loved him. He then SA'd her and threatened to kill her children if she reported him. There was a fifth victim whose case would lead to Lycan's ultimate arrest and that 225-year sentence. Another reason Lycan looked good for the girl's disappearance was a neighbor to the Jackson family claimed to have heard the Pamela Jackson on a party line talking to a man named David about how they went out drinking, she was hungover, and that David had slammed her hand into a car door, and then the David character told her that he wished he had taken pictures of her. But with that being said, there was not exactly enough evidence to say that that was David Lycan who was on the phone with her. Now, in an interview with Lycan's sister, the one who reported him to the police in the first place, they set up a bunch of different pictures of cars of which one she saw on the property that night, and she pointed out a Studebaker Lark was the exact same year and model of car that the girls were driving that night. When they asked her if she saw any bodies or limbs of the girls, she claimed that she saw Cheryl slumped over the steering wheel and Pamela was sitting in the passenger seat with her head against the window. A search of the Lycan family farm did turn up some items that were believed to belong to the girls, but no bodies or the car were found on the property. In 2006, an inmate with the last name Black Crow told authorities that Lycan had confessed to him that he did in fact kill the two girls. Black Crow was fitted with a wire going back into the prison, and he got recordings believed to be David Lycan telling the story of how he killed both the girls and tied up one of them for over 6 hours. With all of this evidence pointing at David Lycan, it was looking very good that he was the one who was responsible for the two girls' disappearance. But later, Black Crow would then admit that he faked the entire recording of the confession with another inmate in order to try and lower his own sentence. And eventually the indictment against Lycan was dropped, and the case again did not have any real direction. And it seemed like this case may never be solved, until September of 2013, when a man who was fishing near Brill Creek noticed something in the water. It was the tires of a car that was upside down under the water. He contacted authorities, and they were able to remove a hubcap off of the car which matched a 1960 Studebaker Lark, as well as they were able to read the license plate on the car to confirm that it was in fact the car the girls were driving that night. Whenever they did eventually get the car out of the water, they noticed that the car was still in third gear, the lights were on, and there was severe damage to one of the tires. Of course, there was a lot of damage to this car. It was sitting in the water for over 40 years. It is believed that night, following the boys, with all the dust flying up in rural South Dakota, they simply missed the bridge and flew over into the water and drowned that night. This is the south side of the bridge. This is the side where the car was found. The guy was fishing. Looked over the edge. Found tires sticking out. If you look at the river now, we're coming into December, hence the hat. Now this river is extremely low. But for 40 years, it wasn't. Back whenever the girls first fell in, this was a pretty deep river, flowing pretty heavy. It flooded, and then there was an extreme drought, and that's whenever a man went fishing over the bridge, happened to notice tires sticking out on this side of the bridge. Called the cops. They came out, and not too long after discovered that it was, in fact, the car that the girls were driving that day, that Studebaker. Now this did actually solve what happened to the two girls, but it makes you wonder what was going on with Lycan's sister and all this evidence that came forward. Or supposed evidence, the confessions and all that stuff. Her seeing bodies, supposedly, her being able to identify the car. It still makes me wonder if he didn't have something to do with this, which I know it's weird, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't mean that he couldn't have done something with the girls and then put them in the water. But at the same time, you kind of had to just look at it what it is. The two girls went missing on that road, and they were found under the bridge in their car. They did recover DNA off the two bodies that were found in the car, and they were able to confirm that it was Pamela and Cheryl. Here's kind of a sad part of the story, was Cheryl's father never stopped looking for her. In fact, he was out there every chance he got. He was looking in the ditches. He went out there on the weekends leading up to his death at, I believe he was 102 years old. And he passed away just 5 days before the car was found. But due to him passing away, there was a lot of family in the area for his funeral service whenever the girls were found. So I was thinking about this. The channel is Local Legends with Bert and Moran. I go over a lot of spooky stuff. This is not a paranormal investigation thing. And I often like to talk about legends. In this story, for me, I think the legend would have to be Oscar, Pam's dad. He never stopped looking for his daughter. He would go to the police station and go through all the pictures of the found people that were discovered and unidentified. He'd look through all of them trying to identify if it was his daughter or not. He would walk up and down these roads for years, every chance he got. He lived to be 102, and he never gave up looking for her. And then 5 days after he died, she was discovered. So for me, I think he's the real legend of this story because he never gave up. He was out here doing what he could. Extremely sad what happened, a very sad story, but an interesting one. I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe that the two girls simply missed the bridge due to the dirt flying up that night into their lights? Or do you think Lycan had something to do with it? Or do you have a theory of your own? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on Twitter at Bert and Moran, Instagram at Bert and Moran, and obviously here on YouTube at Local Legends Bert and Moran. TikTok, I believe it's Bam Moran. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.